Section 19, Book the 19th of the Iliad of Homer. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Stephen Carney. The Iliad of Homer, by Homer, translated by Theodore Alois Buckley. Section 19, Book the 19th. Argument. Thetis, having brought Achilles his new armour, and promised to preserve the body of Patroclus from corruption, he is reconciled to Agamemnon, and being miraculously invigorated by Minerva, goes forth to battle, regardless of the prediction of his fate by his horse Xanthus. Saffron-robed Morn was rising from the streams of ocean, that she might bear light to immortals and mortals. But Thetis came to the ships, bearing the gifts from the god. Her dear son she found lying upon Patroclus, bitterly lamenting, and his numerous companions were lamenting around him. But near to him stood the divine of goddesses, and hung upon his hand, and spoke, and addressed him: "My son, let us suffer him now to lie, grieved although we be, since first he has been laid low by the counsel of the gods. But do thou receive these distinguished arms from Vulcan, very beautiful, such as no man has ever worn upon his shoulders." Having thus spoken, the goddess placed the armour before Achilles, and they, all curiously wrought, clashed aloud. Then tremor seized all the Myrmidons, nor did any one dare to look directly at them, but they fled in fear. But when Achilles saw them, the more rage entered him, and his eyes shone terribly beneath his eyelids, like a flame, and he was delighted, holding in his hands the splendid gifts of the god. But after he had delighted his mind, beholding these artificial works, he immediately addressed to his mother winged words: "Mother mine, the god hath indeed given arms, such as are fit to be works of immortals, nor that a mortal man could make. Truly now will I arm myself. But I very much fear, lest in the meantime the flies, having entered the gallant son of Menœtius by his spear-inflicted wounds, create maggots, and pollute the corse, for life in it is destroyed, and all the parts of the body grow putrid." But him the silver-footed goddess Thetis then answered: "My child, let not these things be a care to thy mind. I will endeavour to drive away from him the fierce swarms, the flies which devour heroes slain in battle. For although he lie an entire year, his body shall always be uncorrupted, or even better. But do thou, having summoned the Grecian heroes to an assembly, having renounced thy wrath towards Agamemnon, the shepherd of the people, arm thyself quickly for war, and put on thy might." Thus therefore, having spoken, she infused into him the most daring courage, and then instilled into Patroclus, through the nostrils, ambrosia and ruby nectar, that his body might be uncorrupted. But noble Achilles went along the shore of the sea, shouting fearfully, and aroused the Grecian heroes, so that even those who used formerly to remain in the assemblage of the ships, both those who were pilots, and who held the rudders of the ships, and the pursuers who were at the ships, dispensers of food, even these men indeed went to the assembly, because Achilles appeared, for he had long abstained from the grievous battle. And two servants of Mars, the warlike son of Tydeus and noble Ulysses, went limping, leaning upon a spear, for they still had painful wounds, and advancing they sat in the front seats. But last came the king of men, Agamemnon, having a wound. For him also, in the sharp battle, Coon the son of Antenor had wounded with his brazen spear. Then when all the Greeks were assembled, swift-footed Achilles, rising up amongst them, said: "Son of Atreus, this would surely have been somewhat better for both thee and me, when we too, grieved at heart, raged with soul-devouring contention for the sake of a girl. Would that Diana had slain her with an arrow in the ships on that day, when wasting I took Lyrnessus. Then indeed so many Greeks had not seized the mighty ground in their teeth under the hands of the enemy, I being continually enraged. This, however, was better for Hector and the Trojans, but I think the Greeks will long remember the contention of you and me. But let us leave these things as past, although grieved, subduing from necessity the soul within our bosoms. And now I terminate my wrath, nor is it at all fit that I always obstinately be enraged. But come quickly, incite the long-haired Achaeans to battle, in order that still I may make trial of the Trojans, going against them, if they wish to pass the night at the ships. But of them I think that any will very gladly bend the knee, whoever shall escape out of the destructive fight from my spear." Thus he spoke, but the well-grieved Greeks rejoiced, the magnanimous son of Peleus renouncing his wrath. But them the king of men, Agamemnon, also addressed out of the same place, from his seat, nor advancing into the midst: "O friends, heroes of the Greeks, servants of Mars, it is becoming indeed that ye should hearken to me, thus rising, nor is it convenient that thou shouldst interrupt, for it is difficult even for one being skilled. But in a great uproar of men, how can any one hear or speak? But he is interrupted, although being a clear-toned orator. I indeed will direct myself to the son of Peleus. But do ye, the other Greeks, understand, and carefully learn my meaning. Often already have the Greeks spoken this saying to me, and have rebuked me, but I am not to blame, but Jove and Fate and Erinus, roaming amid the shades, who during the assembly cast into my mind a sad injury, on that day when I myself took away the reward of Achilles. But what could I do? For the deity accomplishes all things. Pernicious Ate, the venerable daughter of Jove, who injures all. Her feet are tender, for she does not approach the ground, but she walks over the heads of men, injuring mankind, and one at least she fetters. For at one time she injured even Jove, who they say is the most powerful of men and gods. But him Juno, being a female, deceived by her guile on that day when Alcmene was about to bring forth mighty Hercules in well-walled Thebes. He indeed, boasting, had said among all the gods, Hear me, all ye gods and all ye goddesses, whilst I speak those things which the mind within my bosom urges. This day Ilithyia, presiding over births, shall bring into the light a certain man, who shall be ruler over all his neighbours, one of those men of the blood of my race. But him the august Juno addressed, devising guile. Thou shalt lie, nor shalt thou insure accomplishment to thy speech. But come, swear a firm oath to me, O Olympian, that he shall indeed be ruler over all his neighbours, who shall this day fall between the feet of a woman, among those men who are of the blood of thy family. Thus she spoke, but Jove perceived not her crafty design, but he swore the mighty oath, and afterwards was much befooled. Then Juno, springing forth, quitted the top of Olympus, and came speedily to Achaean Argos, where she knew the noble spouse of Sthenelus, the son of Perseus. And she indeed was pregnant of her beloved son, and the 7th month was at hand. And she brought him into light, being deficient the number of months, but kept back the delivery of Alemone, and restrained the Ilithyia. And herself bearing the message, addressed Jove, the son of Saturn. Father Jove, hurler of the red lightning, I will put a certain matter in thy mind. A noble man is now born, who shall rule the Argives, Eurystheus, the son of Perseus, thy offspring, nor is it unbecoming that he should govern the Argives. Thus she spoke, but sharp grief smote him in his deep mind, and immediately he seized Ate by her head of shining curls, enraged in his mind, and swore a powerful oath, that Ate, who injures all, should never again return to Olympus and the starry heaven. Thus saying, he cast her from the starry heaven, whirling her round in his hand. But she quickly reached the works of men. On her account he always groaned, when he beheld his beloved son suffering unworthy toil under the labours of Eurystheus. So I also, when the great crest-tossing Hector was thus destroying the Greeks at the sterns of the ships, was not able to forget the wrong which I had formerly foolishly committed. But since I have suffered harm, and Jove has taken away my reason, I am willing again to appease thee, and to give infinite presents. But arise to the battle, and incite the other people, and I myself will pledge myself to furnish all the presents, as many as noble Ulysses yesterday going to thee promised in thy tents. Yet if thou wilt, wait a little, although hastening to battle, and my servants taking the presents from my ship shall bring them, that thou mayest see that I will present thee with appeasing offerings. But him swift-footed Achilles answering addressed, Most glorious son of Atreus, king of men, Agamemnon, whether thou wilt furnish gifts, as is meet, or keep them with me, will be seen. But now let us very quickly be mindful of the contest, for it is not fitting to waste time in idle talk, nor to delay, as a mighty work is yet undone. But as some one may again behold Achilles among the front ranks, destroying the phalanxes of the Trojans with his brazen spear, so also let some one of you, keeping this in mind, fight with his man. But him Ulysses, of many wiles, answering, addressed, Not thus, brave as thou art, O godlike Achilles, urge on the sons of the Greeks, fasting towards Ilium, about to fight with the Trojans. For the conflict will not be for a short time only, when once the phalanxes of men shall mingle, and the god breathe might into both. But command the Greeks to be fed at the ships with food and wine, for this is might and vigour. For a man unrefreshed by food would not be able to fight against the enemy all day to the setting sun. For although he might desire in his mind to fight, yet his limbs gradually grow languid, and thirst and hunger come upon him, and his knees fail him as he goes. The man, on the other hand, who is satiated with wine and food, fights all day with hostile men. The heart within his breast is daring, nor are his limbs at all fatigued before that all retire from battle. And let the king of men Agamemnon bring the gifts into the midst of the assembly, that all the Greeks may see them with their eyes, and thou mayest be delighted in thy mind. Let him moreover swear an oath to thee, standing up among the Greeks, that he has never ascended her bed, nor has been mingled with her, as is the custom, O king of men and wives. And to thee thyself also let the soul within thy breast be placid. Then let him next conciliate thee by a rich banquet within his tents, that thou mayest not have aught wanting of redress. And for the future, O son of Atreus, thou wilt be more just towards another. For it is by no means unworthy that a king should appease a man, when he may first have given offence. But him the king of men, Agamemnon, in return addressed: I rejoice, O son of Laertes, having heard thy speech. For with propriety hast thou gone through and enumerated all things. These things I am willing to swear, as my mind orders me, in presence of a god, nor will I perjure myself. But let Achilles remain here at least for a little while, though hastening to battle, and do all ye others remain assembled, until they bring the gifts from my tents, and we strike faithful leagues. To thyself, however, O Ulysses, I give this charge, and order thee, selecting the principal youths of all the Greeks, to bear from my ship the gifts, as many as we yesterday promised that we should give to Achilles, and to lead hither the women. But let Talthybius also quickly prepare for me through the wide army of the Greeks a boar to sacrifice to Jove and the sun. Him answering, swift-footed Achilles then addressed: Most glorious son of Atreus, king of men, Agamemnon, at some other time ought they rather to attend to these things, when any cessation of battle hereafter be, and so much ardour be not in my bosom. But at present those lie mangled, whom Hector son of Priam subdued, when Jove gave him the glory, but ye urge them to food. Now indeed I should excite the sons of the Greeks to fight, fasting, but with the setting sun, to prepare a large supper, after we have revenged our disgrace. Before that neither drink nor food shall pass down my throat, my companion being slain, who lies in my tent, torn with a sharp brass, turned towards the vestibule, whilst his comrades mourn around these things are not a care to my mind, but slaughter and bloodshed, and the dreadful groans of heroes. But him much scheming Ulysses answering addressed: O Achilles, son of Peleus, by far the bravest of the Greeks, thou art superior indeed to me, and not a little more valiant with the spear, but I indeed excel thee much in prudence, because I was born before thee, and no more. Wherefore let thy mind be restrained by my words. Soon is there a satiety of contest to the men, a most abundant crop of whom the brass pours upon the earth, but the harvest is very small. When Jove, who is the umpire of the battle of men, inclines his scales, it is by no means fit that the Greeks should lament the dead with the stomach, for in great numbers, and one upon the other, are they every day falling. When, therefore, could any one respire from toil? But it is necessary to bury him whosoever may die, having a patient mind, weeping for a day. But as many as survive the hateful combat should be mindful of drinking and of food, in order that we may ever the more ceaselessly contend with our enemies, clad as to our bodies in impenetrable brass. Nor let any of the troops lie by awaiting another exhortation, for evilly will that exhortation come upon him, whoever may be left at the ships of the Greeks. But advancing in a body, let us stir up the keen battle against the horse-breaking Trojans. He said, and chose as his companions the son of glorious Nestor, Themiges, son of Phyleus, Thoas, and Meriones, Icomedes, son of Creon, and Menelaus. And they proceeded to go towards the tent of Agamemnon, son of Atreus. Immediately after the word was spoken, and the work was perfected, 7 tripods they bore from the tent, which he had promised him, and 20 splendid goblets, and 12 steeds, and straightway led forth 7 blameless women, skilled in works, but the 8th was fair-cheeked Briseïs. But Ulysses, placing 10 whole talents of gold, led the way. And with him the other youths of the Greeks bore the presents, and placed them in the midst of the assembly. But Agamemnon rose up, and Talthybius, like unto a god in his voice, stood beside the shepherd of the people, holding a boar in his hands. Then the son of Atreus, drawing the knife with his hands, which always hung by the great scabbard of his sword, cutting off the forelock of the boar, prayed, lifting up his hands to Jove. But all the Greeks sat in silence in the same spot, listening in a becoming manner to the king. But praying, he spoke, looking towards the wide heaven. "Now first let Jove be witness, and the most supreme and best of gods, and earth, and sun, and ye Furies, who beneath the earth chastise men, whoever may swear a falsehood. Never have I laid hands upon the maid Briseis, needing her for the sake of the couch, or any other purpose, but inviolate has she remained in my tents. But if any of these things be false, may the gods inflict on me those very many distresses which they inflict when men sin in swearing." He said, and cut the throat of the boar with the ruthless brass, which Talthybius, whirling round, cast into the mighty water of the hoary sea, as food for fishes. But Achilles, rising, said among the war-loving Greeks, "O father Jove, certainly thou givest great calamities to men, for never could Atrides have so thoroughly aroused the indignation in my bosom, nor foolish led away the girl, I being unwilling. But Jove for some intent wished death should happen to many Greeks. But now go to the repast, that we may join battle." Thus then he spoke, and dissolved the assembly in haste. They indeed were separated, each to his own ship, but the magnanimous Myrmidons were occupied about the gifts, and bearing them went to the ship of godlike Achilles. These they laid up in the tents, and placed the women in seats, but the illustrious attendants drove the horses to the stud. But afterwards Briseis, like unto golden Venus, when she beheld Patroclus lacerated with a sharp spear, throwing herself about him, wept aloud, and with her hands tore her breast and tender neck, and fair countenance. Then the woman, like unto the goddesses, weeping, said, "O Patroclus, most dear to my wretched soul, I left thee indeed alive, departing from my tent, but now returning I find thee dead. O chieftain of the people, how in my case evil ever succeeds evil! The hero indeed to whom my father and venerable mother had given me, I saw pierced with a sharp brass before the city, and 3 beloved brothers whom the same mother had brought forth to me, all drew on the destructive day. Nevertheless thou didst not suffer me to weep, when swift Achilles slew my husband, and laid waste the city of divine Mynes. But thou saidst thou wouldst render me the wedded wife of noble Achilles, lead me in the ships to Phthia, and prepare the nuptial feast amongst the Myrmidons. Therefore do I insatiably lament thee, dead being ever gentle." Thus she spoke, weeping, and the women lamented for Patroclus, as a pretext, but really each for her own ills. And around him Achilles were collected the elders of the Greeks, entreating him to take refreshment, but he, moaning, refused. "I entreat you, if any of my beloved companions would be obedient to me, bid me not satiate my heart with food or drink, since heavy grief hath invaded me, but I will wait entirely till the setting sun, and will endure." So saying, he dismissed the other kings, but 2 sons of Atreus remained, and noble Ulysses, Nestor, Idomeneus, and the aged knight Phoenix, constantly endeavouring to delight him sorrowing, nor was he at all delighted, before he should enter the mouth of bloody war. But remembering Patroclus, he frequently heaved a sigh, and said, "Surely once thou too, O unhappy one, dearest of my companions, wouldst thyself have set before me a plentiful feast, within my tent, speedily and diligently, when the Greeks hastened to make tearful war upon the horse-breaking Trojans. But now thou liest mangled. But my heart is without drink and food, though they are within, from regret for thee. For I could not suffer anything worse, nor even if I were to hear of my father being dead, who now perhaps sheds a tender tear in Phthia from the want of such a son, while I and a foreign people wage war against the Trojans for the sake of detested Helen, or him my beloved son who was nurtured for me at Scyros, if indeed he still lives, godlike Neoptolemus, for formerly the mind within my bosom hoped that I alone should perish here in Troy, far from steed-nourishing Argos, and that thou shouldst return to Phthia, that thou mightest lead back my son in thy black ship from Scyros, and mightest show him everything, my property, my servants, and my great lofty domed abode. For now I suppose that Peleus is either totally deceased, or that he barely alive suffers pain from hateful old age, and that he is continually expecting bad news respecting me, when he shall hear of my being dead." Thus he spoke, weeping, and the elders also groaned, remembering, each of them, the things which they had left in their dwellings. But the son of Saturn felt compassion, seeing them weeping, and immediately to Minerva addressed winged words: "O daughter mine, thou entirely now desertest thy valiant hero. Is Achilles then no longer at all a care to thee in thy mind? He himself is sitting before his lofty beaked ships. bewailing his dear companion, while the others have gone to a banquet, but he is unrefreshed and unfed. Go therefore, instil into his breast nectar and delightful ambrosia, that hunger may not come upon him." So saying, he urged on Minerva, who was before eager. But she, like unto a broad-winged, shrill-voiced harpy, leaped down from the heavens through the air. The Greeks, however, were then arming themselves throughout the camp, when she instilled into the bosom of Achilles nectar and delightful ambrosia, that unpleasant hunger might not come upon his limbs. Then she went to the solid mansion of her powerful sire, and they apart poured forth from the swift ships. And as when thick snowflakes fly down from Jove, beneath the force of the cold, air-clearing Boreas, so from the ships were borne out crowded helmets, shining brightly, and bossed shields, strong cavitied corslets, and ashen spears. But the sheen reached to heaven, and all the earth around smiled beneath the splendour of the brass, and a trampling of the feet of men arose beneath. In the midst noble Achilles was armed, and there was a gnashing of his teeth, and his eyes shone like a blaze of fire. But intolerable grief entered his heart within him, and enraged against the Trojans, he put on the gifts of the god, which Vulcan toiling had fabricated for him. First around his legs he placed the beautiful greaves, joined with silver clasps. Next he put on the corslet round his breast, and suspended from his shoulders the brazen, silver-studded sword. Then he seized the shield, large and solid, the sheen of which went to a great distance, as of the moon. And as when from the sea the blaze of a burning fire shines to mariners, which is lit aloft amongst the mountains in a solitary place, but the storm bears them against their inclination away from their friends over the fishy deep, so from the shield of Achilles, beautiful and skilfully made, the brightness reached the sky. But raising it, he placed the strong helmet upon his head, and the helmet crested with horsehair shone like a star. And the golden tufts which Vulcan had diffused thick around the cone were shaken. Then noble Achilles tried himself in his arms, if they would fit him, and if his fair limbs would move freely in them. But they were like wings to him, and lifted up the shepherd of the people. And from its sheath he drew forth his paternal spear, heavy, great, and stout, which no other of the Greeks was able to brandish, but Achilles alone knew how to hurl it, a Pelian ash, which Chiron had cut for his father from the top of Pelion, to be a destruction to heroes. But Automedon and Alcimus, harnessing the steeds, yoked them, and beautiful collars were upon them. They put the bridles into their jaws, and drew back the reins towards the well-glued car, when Automedon, seizing the shining lash, fitted to his hand, leaped into the car. Achilles, armed for battle, mounted behind him, glittering in his armour like the shining sun, and terribly he gave command to the horses of his sire. "Xanthus and Balius, illustrious offspring of Podargus, resolve now in a different manner to bring back your charioteer in safety to the body of the Greeks, after we are satiated with battle, nor leave him there dead, like Patroclus." But from beneath the yoke, Xanthus, his swift-footed steed, addressed him, and immediately hung down his head, and his whole mane, drooping from the ring which was near the yoke, reached the ground. But the white-armed goddess Juno gave him the power of speech. "Now at least we will bear thee safe, O impetuous Achilles, but the fatal day draws nigh to thee. Nor are we to blame, but a mighty deity and violent destiny. For not by our laziness or sloth have the Trojans stripped the armour from the shoulders of Patroclus, but the bravest of the gods, whom fair-haired Latona brought forth, slew him among the front ranks, and gave glory to Hector. And though we can run even with the blast of Zephyrus, which they say is the most fleet, yet to thyself it is fated that thou shouldst be violently subdued by a god and a man." Of him having thus spoken, the Furies restrained the voice, but him swift-footed Achilles, greatly indignant, addressed: "O Xanthus, why dost thou predict my death to me? For it is not at all necessary for thee. Well do I myself know that it is my fate to perish here, far away from my dear father and mother. Nevertheless, I will not cease before the Trojans are abundantly satiated with war." He spoke, and shouting amongst the front ranks, directed on his solid-hoofed steeds. End of Book the 19th. Read by Stephen Carney.